So one of the things I'm really interested in is sound. Can you hear me? Okay. Sound is a liberatory, utopian liberatory dimension because it is where the body, which is redolent of the universe, is connected to language on a very primary level. It's before gravity, before light, before the universe became transparent to light. Sound shaped and conditioned our primordial environment and in wave-like forms formed the galaxies, right? And that we still see in the sky today. And this, of course, is where sound connects language to the fundamental vibrations and modalities of the universe. You all know that the universe hums, right? So it does. And that's the name of my first piece I'm going to read. Is called Hum. It's a modular essay that's built on accumulation and not climax or arc. When I turned 12, my family moved to the edge of state game land. I walked its paths or made my own while listening. The wind hushing treetops, my stride shushing ferns. As I walked, my throat emptied and a buried sound forced its way out of my face. I walked into being something alone and overripe as a silver-veined diva voice emerged in soft spectacle, barely audible and tuneless. Mostly, I did not know I was sounding until someone called my attention to it. My high hum asked for no answer, yet my mother and brother noted the leakage and annoyance. Sometimes worried strangers cocked their heads at me. Some acted trapped inside the sound. The hum's ambient sonority, mimicry of a local wasp, fly, or bee, led me further into the woods. Streaming through me, this sound only. Its occupying power may have earmarked my voice for something more than speech. An inrush of language filled my mouth. Half-heard phrases slipped into conflicting ideas, gardens of tones gagged with broken slogans, sound bites embedded in flack and facts, muttered accusations thickened with the irrepressible detritus of lyrics. Without moving my lips in a non-volitional ventriloquy, I choked up. My mouth became a mine for all sounds, all words at once, flattened and trembling. My mouth fogged with its own recalls. It rang out like an emergency alert. When my family relocated, I was moving into adolescence, both giving me means and reason to hide. At the root of hum is to cover embarrassment. Did my shame have a voice? Was humming a kind of oral blush? Was my hum drawing out or drowning out another voice a little bit?
I walked its path and made my own while listening.
Was I becoming a witch or a weird sister?
Without moving my lips. Red. All sounds, all words at once. Red.
I feared being possessed by spirits.
Tuning in and tuning out my hum red. The sound of captivity red.
I read aloud about preteen girls suddenly talking in tongues, possessed, taken to slamming furniture around with their minds, or temporarily in the grips of a man's voice.
Susceptible to ghosts.
I identified with these isolated girls. Abandoning my ordinariness, I left myself susceptible to ghosts. Waiting and sick of waiting, I called to them a high voltage signal. From my radio body in search of belonging, I tried actually to conduct invisible anima. Wherever I went, an aimless hum accompanied me. I want to dig out the primal scene of my hum, but the word only leads me back to my own name.
My hum opened another hole for hearing. I swallowed speech instead.
Thus, I set about echolocating myself. I sent out my high drone. It returned as part of me I could not entirely locate. Eventually, I find myself here. Eventually, I hear a new voice coming into earshot and do not recall my prior life. What would I do with such noise? Picture the head of Medusa.
It forces my attention directly in front that makes it appear to be sideways.
Shrieking hole.
The peripheral.
Shrieking hole.
The blank.
Shrieking hole.
The noise. It defies your desire to know what it's about. The peripheral eyes are lost familiarity. The blank. Nothing. Time. Nothing.
Picture the head of Medusa, shrieking hole, mouth gaping, tongue protruding. Freud thought Medusa's head signified castration, panic, and men. Freud also believed, as was cutting-edge science in the early 19th century, that a woman's markedly masculine larynx was a sign of queerness. When teenage Dora came to him with frequent attacks of nervous, spasmodic coughing and no voice, he applied electrotherapy to her throat. She sputtered but did not spill anything. Her throat trickled. She coughed her way into existence.
I read your book aloud in order to hear you speak. Reading listening out from hiddenness, a show of nakedness, rushing ahead then. I hear half-beats, I hear echo, each listening moves. I read to myself, author and audience, a mouseless voice.
I think of her beautiful larynx and wish.
To see her closed lips, beyond the words, beyond thought,
beyond speech.
speech.
I think of her beautiful larynx and wish that everything that issued or didn't from it were sex rather than sexuality. I imagine her coughing as a cousin to my hum, discharging representation, imitation, transfiguration. We swallowed speech instead of having our tongues cut out or held. We will not claim our mouths. We will never get over it. I hid in my hum's protective power, which repelled the uncanny by attracting it and assuming it within itself, a telepathic magic. Through it, I entered sensation. My tongue, tonsils, larynx, and jaw grew. My plasma quickened. Introspectively, my body uncoiled feelers and loosened the noose of identity. The hum wove itself around everything in the form of questioning. With equal anguish, I called to and called off a female body. My sonic ornament was a customized flush of puberty, a condensed libidinal vehemence, a prophylaxis against loss. Yet, I have been resisting admitting the pleasure it gave me, the joy of the vibratory oral fix. It filled me with good feeling. Much later, I will retrieve the sound in the distance of my skull. I will recreate the feeling, flushed with expanding harmonies of wind, space, clouds, and the relief of belonging. Four years later, Everyone gathers around me in the orthodontist's office. My mouth is open wide. Look at the x-ray. The doctor has discovered something he wants to show us. My jaw has kept growing long after the rest of me stopped. Jutting out, he says, then stops. He's excited about the anomaly, getting ahead of himself. I think, isn't it usual that some parts of us stay behind? He carefully avoids evoking a Neanderthal, but my jaw is flexed, determined aggression and appetite radiating. Not speaking, but spitting red. Have I made myself clear? Talk it out, that voice trapped behind teeth, vomit and refuse to swallow. I gag on my own voice as it fills my mouth. Spit it out, red. Open my trap. No words for what the mouth knows. Frequency is what you measure, pitch is what you hear. It's a hum from Old English homin, to make a murmuring sound to cover embarrassment. Later, medieval English hummin, to buzz, drone, akin to Dutch hummel, humblebee, and German human, to hum, probably ultimately of imitative origin. But what does a hum imitate exactly? A girlfriend tells you to try humming, but you don't want to hum a song when you're giving head. If a blowjob is imitation of sex and also a thing in and of itself, couldn't a hum be both as well? Remember the 7th grader in the bleachers between her boyfriend's legs, head bobbing like an oil drill? She insisted later that she was crying in his lap, but no one heard her. You want misdirection, the sound of your pleasure, to ignite his. But you also want distraction to cover up the one-way service with a convincing sound of your own enjoyment. This type of blowjob, called a hummer, involves faking something that might have once come naturally before you knew it was a technique. No, nobody's make eye contact with me. I read your book aloud in order to hear you speak. It's impossible. A private radio colors the solitary hours. I don't know you, but I know this feeling. Reading by listening, my heart's deep tissue knocking turns my whole body into liquid sound. Whose voice? No one's, Beckett says. There's no one. There's a voice without a mouth and somewhere a kind of hearing, something compelled to hear, and so something compelled to speak. When I drag my voice out from hiddenness, my body is a study in stuck visibility. To say I read aloud means an exhibition, a show of nakedness, a show of hiding in fits. My body blasts through my voice, all nerves and red eagerness. It arranges for me to speak with the conviction of an original, but rushing ahead and backpedaling, my voice splits, slaps together, syncopates, slips. I hear vowels issuing from my mouth, and then I hear their echo, each listening loops, a circuit of vicarious voices, each mocking my own, funneling back as a minuscule ruse. Stunned by my audacious shame, my voice continues thrashing, unable to find the rhythm. During the war, Croatians take 2 orphaned bear cubs into captivity to raise in a rural sanctuary. One bear lumbers into a nest and falls asleep as soon as he is lying beside another warm body. The bears don't touch even in their dreams. All night, their breathing rakes together. In the morning, one bear sucks off the other, always the same one, several times a day. Not once in over 7 years does the receiver reciprocate. Scientists question the evolutionary significance of fellatio, especially long-term, recurrent, one-sided fellatio. Here's where I'm going to ask you to hum with me for about a minute. I'll explain this later, but let's all, I'll go like this when I want you to stop.
I identified with these isolated girls. Abandoned my ordinariness, I left myself to something gross, waiting and sick of waiting. I called to them, a high voltage signal. From my radio body, I tried actually to conduct an invisible analog. Bruce voice, there's no words, there's a voice in my mouth, somewhere I'm kind of hearing, something compelled to hear. And so something compelled to speak. I drag my voice out from goodness. My body is a steady and step of visibility.
Thank you. There's more mystery. The bear hums while giving head. You can hear it even at a distance. The cry that's stuck in his throat when his mother died breaks to the surface as vibrations, grief swallowed and made to hum, forming another kind of skin. He has to go on enduring in its body. When a sound isn't fully expressed in infancy, it returns. While his mother was alive and nursing, humming induced milk let down. Now it is a surrogate sound, forming an autonomous comfort loop, inducing mother and lover at once. Instead, what we get is a subliminal suggestion of electricity buzzing all around us. Streetlights, ATM machines, security systems, transistors, alarm clocks, computers. Just punch up the volume of any audio recording to extract this strange sonic landscape, an intricately patterned and fluctuating digital watermark for each city block, each hour of the day and day of the week. That noise might become the voice you hear inside your head, and it could say anything. William Burroughs channels the sound in Naked Lunch when he writes, I know this one pusher walks around humming a tune and everyone he passes takes it up. He is so gray and spectral and anonymous. They don't see him and they think it is their own minds humming the tune. A hum is contagious. I am an addict of its numbing. I contract it from the grid, from lines cutting across sky, from every outlet. It is the sound of a human becoming a machine. Time machine, dream machine, forgetting machine, a machine to ward away grief or draw it closer, a machine for delirium. We focus our eyes on the page and immediately we hear voices inside us. And if self is analogous to voice, who made it so? Mesmerized by the sound of her own voice, Echo gave up her body to it. Who is there? Who is there? Like Echo's voice without a body, a hum without a source is born of a disregard for reciprocity. On the phone, I hear the company's electronic voice saying, I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that. Could you say that again and speak more clearly? Or my voice, also imitating a human's, telling you to leave a message because though I'm speaking your ear, I'm away. Ancient Greeks believed that reading aloud invited the author's voice inside as an erotic will to be inhabited by another. Text used the human voice in order to live. Reading aloud meant opening yourself to penetration, another mind screwing itself into your mouth. In exchange, you learned to love, to be fucked. You did not simply lend your voice to a text. You became possessed by it. You became a passive medium by which the text came into full realization. You rode that dark matter into another self. For this reason, reading aloud was often left to slaves. The next piece I'm going to read is sort of changing projects a little. That one was the middle piece from my book that is coming out any second now, called Saturation Project. It's an experimental memoir, so I've been calling it at least. And this is an excerpt from this little chapbook that I published I guess, about a year ago, and it's out of print now, but I just wanted to show it to you because I think it's so pretty. It has pictures in it, and the pictures I will be showing you via a PowerPoint. They're all forensic images that have been selected and cropped. But the initiating story for the book, or the initiating event for the book, was it's also an essay. It was a Black woman who died in my hometown, and she was shot by a white cop on a domestic abuse call. So that was at least one of the initiating stories of this piece. And oh, there it is. Yep. So, but I don't want to start it quite yet because it's on a timer. Okay, sorry. It's all very complicated technology up here. So I'm going to skip around in this, but and I've tried to, you'll have a hard time believing this, but I tried to sort of cut out the most devastating parts of the book. So hit this, okay, thank you. All right, sweet. So the other thing I wanted to say is that because at the center of this book is a dead woman's body, I wanted to make note that this is often over-relished, poeticized object in our culture, something that we often can project our own fears and fantasies into. And I'm aware that in the book that I'm focused on another woman's suffering. My relation to it is something I could fetishize, ignore, but mostly sensitize me to my own pain. A decade ago, when I first arrived in Ypsilanti, I kept my eyes open. The weekend we moved in, as we huffed boxes and decided where to put the furniture, a stranger raped our neighbor in her home. We tried to find a place for everything, including the snooze and ourselves. We tried to find a horizon between settling and unsettling, all the hinterland hours leaking shadow into sky. Our neighbor had been raking leaves when she noticed a man watching her from across the street. The intensity of his stare hit her like an emergency as she ran inside. Suddenly, right behind her, the stranger yanked her arm hard. He raped her in the entryway, or he tried to rape her, and in doing so, seriously injured her. There is nothing to distinguish stranger and neighbor except in our taking a position. There is nothing to distinguish this event from countless others, except we were trying to think of this neighborhood as home and raising a baby girl. Neighbors looked away. We embarrassed them, or they were embarrassed for us. One spoke in loud whispers as though hoping to be overheard from the street. No one who passed along the story knew much, and everyone who heard it went back to walking their dog or making their way to the bus stop. As fewer people stopped to ask how we liked the neighborhood, the days clarified themselves until stunned. Even the wide streets, vacant buildings, and unkempt parks seemed constricted by a glassy apprehension. As far as I remember, that winter turned into a season of exceptional storms. This was voltage, a body rooted through its own pulsating vistas. I began to see as Ypsilantians saw, hours breaking over an abundance of level land divided into two landscapes. One always visible, but never accessible, the other invisible, even though we crossed and recrossed it daily. We forget in both directions the time had already taken shape in us as gender. We cut time and beat it, but it owns us. Every woman I know here divides her life. Before the cancer, after the rape, before the child, after the assault, before the divorce, after using, before leaving, before the election, before it went viral, before the cops came, after time circles back for you. Thanks. What is the thing in me that forgets? What allows me to keep walking past the house where a woman almost died, where she took it or fought back, where she cowered in a closet, begging, hands shaking too violently to use her phone, where she didn't see it coming, where she dragged herself bleeding to the front porch? What allows me to join the shrug of those who think there's nothing to be done, nothing I could do? I feel time hurrying past me, washing over me, and with it comes the feeling that I would kill too. I would beat and rape. I would kill in order to no longer despair. I would draw a house and lock you inside it. I would kick open the door. I would feel something heavy and sharp in my hands and instinctively raise it against you. What kind of justice forgets we are all dangerous? If I weren't allowed to enter back into a life, I'd be 100 men with 100 ways of brutalizing. I'd be 100 gunshots, 100,000 decibels coming after you. I'd be that because the civics of this place has turned us into parodies of ourselves. Women curled unconscious on the shadow-dappled wood floor, men fixed in the posture of forever looking into the distance, where after the hit comes the calm. After looking into the freakish greenness that emerges from an excess of blue comes blue itself. It snags on the threshold of this minute, on the verge of our own aspirations. We get caught in the spotlight of a sentence. We are trying to get out of it alive. My eyes graze a gray utilities box where a man is tearing off a sticker. Street artists call their stickers slaps. This man peels off someone's slap in messy strips. He peels the slap of a Black woman's face. When I ask the man what he's doing, he says, "This is private property." I catch her eye on the metal box. It's her only remaining feature, her watch. It's as if she wiped her vision here. The rest is shredded in his fist, as if she is private property or on private property, if she is flattened into an image of private property, where is the danger? There she goes, trashed all over again, gone to pieces and shoved in his backpack. Then I see her whole face stuck on the window of a vacant building, again on the back of a stop sign, on blank spaces all over town. She returns like a refusal. Ask a boyfriend, and he will tell you she wouldn't listen. Ask a cop, and he will tell you she was resisting. Her face is a hole cut in time. When I look at it, her smile puts me into a vast second, the careless moment of a joke. Then I hear the gunshot. I hear her struggle louder than mine. She repeats this moment all over town as I'm waiting for the walk sign. The instant of her death returns, though I was never there. I was living my life whose doors I locked. I will not die like that, not like she did. Hers will always be the face of a dead person to me, two-dimensional, black and white, pixelated. And each time I see it, I come closer to homicide. Minute by minute, we head into harassment, into assault, into murder, into the incest-ridden desolation of child porn and rape. On every calendar day, her face repeating, the dead face replicating itself all over town, the story repeating, her story coming to find me like night finds day. It comes after you, her face like an outbreak of minutes, a pummeling, because her face is where I can't find her, where I pass through each time I leave the house. I see it, and I'm never quite sure I saw it. A state memo says the law of self-defense does not require the least harmful means be employed before a more harmful level of force may be lawfully used. Cops can taser anywhere on the body, but a bullet must go to the T-zone of the face or the center mass of the torso. A small woman who cooked to calm her nerves walks down a dark hall until her face is a door to memory. Her face has no door. You get stuck inside it. Even if you've never seen it, her face stands in for all the parts of writing that go away when I try to write about her. Her face echoes in that gap where the crude technology of memory kinks like spent taser wire. In the photograph, you might mistake the wire for scratches in the parquet under the kitchen table, where chairs move back and forth, recording each meal eaten there. When I was born, whatever happened in the home stayed in the home. There's a gap between then and our laws now doing a different kind of damage. And that gap is where a man-made silence forged from real silence. It is where a cop is more likely to lose his job by smoking a joint than beating his wife. And almost half of police families report domestic violence. A cop takes down her face here, but it reconstitutes over there. A citizen sprays black paint like a hood over her head, a blind spot where a mind should be. Someone draws a penis with ballpoint on her forehead, but my daughter uses a hand wipe to erase it. Because I am living in a city that proliferates a question like a face, because her face appears and disappears on civic surfaces, because her face replaces a blank space, because her face replaces the city piece by piece, claiming it, because her face is half hidden in the half light of waiting, half blowing in the wind, half stuck to the present, near a house where my family lives, where a young girl can look at it and think, not me, because a shunned person becomes a screen. Thank you. Questions? Yes, Anthony.
Tell us about the audio of the first piece. How is it made? Whose voice is that?
Yeah, so I made it in collaboration with a musician, Ben Miller, who he was in Destroy All Monsters, which is a band that the artist Mike Kelly had in the 70s. He's still around though. His brother was also he comes from a family of musicians, or at least all his brothers are musicians. And his brother was in Mission of Burma, which is like a punk band from California in the 80s. But that's his voice and him doing most of the instrumentation, yeah. Are you all writers? No? Yes, no? What kinds of things do you write, or do you want to write? I can ask you questions if you're not going to ask me questions. Yes. The images, okay, so those, no, they're not my images. They're from the crime scene. And my partner, Jeff Clark, cropped them, selected them and cropped them. The idea is to kind of wrest the power of the state away from the state, and also the sort of white gaze away from doing further damage, right? So that was the idea of cropping them and selecting them as they are forensic evidence that it's available to everybody, but so they're all interior scenes, and you can I think what I'm interested in is how little information is really there, right? I mean, there's a lot of sort of open doors and like things that you can't quite see. So it shows you the sort of surface of something that's given with the intent of explaining something, and yet it further confounds the issues. It doesn't really, it resists explanation in any easy way. Yeah.
You said you were going to explain that humming whenever we were doing it.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, thank you. So, I mean, one thing, I love the way that humming brings people together, right? And so the use of the power of the choral experience, but also more specifically, there's an environmentalist and composer named Murray Schafer, and he has this sort of lifelong project of mapping world sounds. And what he discovered is that you go to any town or city and ask people to make the sound of primal unity, you know, which we always ask when we go to a new town, right? And what he discovered is that each person who just ohmed for him sort of randomly, right, at whatever pitch or frequency they felt was the sound of primal unity, that matched in frequency the place where they lived. So you might think of it as this very personal thing, but yet, you know, we're all sort of tuning in to this hum that we don't necessarily even consciously hear, right? So the idea that we're all, and we're absorbing this hum that exists all around us, via electricity and various kinds of technologies that we don't necessarily hear. And also, sort of as a tangent to that, people's pace that they walk is related to that hum as well. So they found that, that every city not only has its sonic watermark, but it also has a pace watermark. So there's a sort of standard, pace that people all have somehow agreed to walk.
So that frequency all man-made, or some natural and some man-made?
The frequency of the sound of the city. I would say that most of it is man-made, most of it's electricity, but of course, like I said before, like the universe is humming as well. So that gets featured in there. And one of the instances that triggered that essay for me was not only sort of remembering that I had this weird humming tendency when my family moved across the country when I was 12, but also a lot of cities will have hums that become news stories, right? And so in my part of the world, there was something called the Windsor hum that was making news. And that is in Windsor, Canada. People were being driven crazy by this hum. And, it was like waking people up at night. It was knocking things off shelves. It was vibrating people's beds. And only some people seem to be able to hear it. And also the Canadian government did a study and found, of course, it was coming from Detroit, right across the river. And they isolated it to Zug Island, which is this kind of industrial wasteland where U.S. Steel has a plant. Of course, nobody in Detroit or on the American side claimed to be able to hear this sound. That was the official story, like those Canadians. But it turns out, of course, that people could hear it in Detroit. It's just that when you have like impoverished communities, nobody listens to them, right? So there's this other aspect of hearing as well that is part of the story, that there's this hum, and it tends to sort of like creep up in weird places. So it's not consistent throughout either city, Windsor or Detroit. You can't hear it no matter where you go. And it's sort of a mystery how it travels and why it gets louder at certain times of the year and softer at other times of the year. Yes?
It was very interesting to me how as we began to hum, it was kind of disparate, different, but the longer we hummed, the more it came to the same pitch, the same volume. It's comparable to our band director saying, listen to all the instruments around you.
You're tuning each other.
Yes,
Yeah.
So do you feel like the universe kind of...
If only Congress could just hum, right? Let's all hum together. Sorry. Before we get into political territory.
Let's give Christine a big round.